Hey, what's up guys? So for the last few weeks, you guys have recommended me to look at Squid Game. And finally, after a ton of comments, I was like, what the f is Squid Game? I looked it up on Netflix and watched one episode, then another one, and before I knew it, I was through the entire season. It's surprisingly well written with a lot of twists and turns throughout that I honestly didn't expect, but I'm guessing it's the death games you want me to cover. We could look at how to increase the odds of winning each one, but I was too slow for that. So instead, let's look at which one of the 6 deadly games you would most likely be able to survive. Now at first I thought it's pretty clear that red light green light would be the easiest to beat. For the ones who don't know, in the first episode 456 people participate in a game where a robot woman is at the end of a field. She covers her eyes and says green light and everyone can walk forward. But when she says red light and turns around and she catches you moving with her camera eyes, you lose. And by lose I mean you get shot. This is the simplest game in the entire show, and it actually allows for everyone to survive. But there is a twist. The people in the game don't know that they'll die if they lose, meaning that once that information is revealed, a mass panic breaks out, with almost everyone running to the exit. This sets up a few circumstances that determine if you will move on to the next level. If you're in the front of the pack and don't panic, your odds of surviving increase drastically. All you have to do is not sprint so that you can quickly stop moving once the girl shouts red light. That's the trap this guy falls in. He desperately wants to be the first one to finish, so he rushes ahead. But when the girl turns around, it takes him too long to stop moving and he gets killed. However, suppose you're in the back of the group. In that case, your strategy almost doesn't even matter, because if you have a horde of idiots bumping into you, forcing you to move, you easily risk getting shot. So even though this game has the most straightforward rules, it's still a high risk that you'll get killed even if you're trying to do everything right. The other one that we can rule out is Tug of War. I think everyone knows this game. You have 2 teams pulling on a rope, and the group that can pull their opponents over a given line wins the game. This one occurs in the 3rd episode, and we see that it depends way too much on who you have in your team. There is some strategy involved, but since most of the people are just pulling without a lot of tricks, you're simply going to be better with more muscular people. Now yes, the old man that's in our main character's group, he says that he has the winning strategy, even though they're probably one of the weakest teams. He says that at the start, they all need to lean back as far as they can. This makes it extremely difficult for the other team to just yank them over the line. But this approach is extremely flawed because all the other team has to do is use a little bit of tactical thinking and they can win in a short amount of time. Once they all lean back, the opponents can just release a little bit and take 1 or 2 steps forward. This will lead to every person in the group completely falling over, and then they are far beyond saving. This is actually how the team we're rooting for wins. They merely take 3 steps forward, which leads to the group of guys tumbling over. So this one depends way too much on who you're playing against. If you're in the weaker team, you can use the old man's strategy, but if the others see what you're doing, they can easily exploit it. The other one that is almost unbeatable is the glass floor game. This is perhaps the most suspenseful of the competitions, as every decision could mean certain death. What happens is that all the remaining players are lined up and need to walk across a bridge beneath which is a deep hole. There are 2 paths with many glass squares. The players have to jump from one glass square to the next, but one of the 2 plates will always break. It very quickly becomes apparent that if you're further in the back, you have a much higher chance of surviving, as the other players will test the glass plates and see which ones break. Now in this trap, the players could choose their place in the line. Before the game started, they could grab different vests with numbers on them. The number decided your place in the queue. If you pick number 1, you're the first to go and almost certainly the first to die. If you choose a higher number, you would go later. But they didn't know which game they're playing ahead of time. So the ones who got their vests first picked all the middle numbers, seeking safety in the herd. But after those vests are all gone, our protagonist, Sung Gi-yeon, I hope I'm saying that correctly, he has to choose if he wants to go very early or very late. The earlier options are good if the game has a time limit, as being the first can give you the most amount of time to complete the task. But the later positions are preferable for difficult games that require a lot of trial and error. You can see how other people do it before you, and that allows you to develop the safest strategy. Eventually, Gi-yeon is faced with the real Sophie's choice of sorts. With all but 2 vests gone, he must decide if he wants to go first or last. Initially, he picks the vest with the number 1, but then some dude begs him to take the last number as he wants to go first. Yes! So those 3 games from the point of view of our protagonist depended a lot on luck, but the other 3 games were a lot more beatable. The second test they face has to do with these cookies. You might have seen people doing this challenge all over the internet. There's a shape in a sugar cookie and you have to scratch it out with a needle without cracking the candy. There are 4 shapes which you can get. A triangle, okay, that's pretty easy. A circle, now that's a little trickier. A star, alright, still doable, but the difficulty is going up. And a fucking umbrella, impossible. At first it might seem like there is too much luck involved since it depends on which shape you choose. However, there was rampant cheating during this game. One character was given privileged information. He was told what the game was ahead of time. Another girl sneaked down an air duct and saw that they were making these cookies. This allowed Cho Sang-woo, who is Gi-yeon's friend, to figure out what the game was before it started. Also, one woman had a lighter, which she used to heat up the needle during the game. Then she could just melt the shape out. What's surprising is that even though Cho Sang-woo knew what the game was going to be, he didn't stop Gi-yeon, his friend and teammate, when he lined up by the umbrella. He almost does, but allows him to go. Now in the group we're following, which is 4 people, everyone lines up by a different shape. The justification for this is diversification. They want to spread out the risk. But I find it awfully convenient that Cho Sang-woo lines up by the triangle, the easiest shape out of the 4. Even if he isn't 100% certain what the game is, he has some insider knowledge and can take an educated guess. So to minimize the risk, he might want to avoid letting his friend line up by the umbrella, as it's almost certain death given that his prediction is right. Then the other game that might be beatable is Squid Game in the final episode. Now to be honest, I still don't quite get the rules to this game. Honestly, I don't even understand how this playing field looks like a squid. They say it a few times, they're like, hey, this looks like a squid. What? Anyway, even though I don't know the rules, I don't think that matters, because you don't really have to play the game. When they explain the rules, there's one thing that's mentioned at the end. If there's a situation where one of them is no longer able to play, the last one standing is declared the winner. This means that you just need to kill your opponent. Of course, it's a very tough situation since these 2 guys have been friends since their childhood. But you have a lot of freedom here. So the way I understand the game is that the defender can't step outside this shape to block off the attacker. But that rule is never actually specified. The first rule is that the attacker must enter the court, run past the defense, and reach the circle. The second rule is that the defender must block the attacks of the attacker and force them outside of the line of the playing field. However, strictly speaking, it doesn't say that the defender has to remain inside the squid. You can use this, for example, as a surprise tactic. If you were in Cho Sang-woo's position, you could step outside the circle and quickly kill Gi-yeon. This would even fit with his character traits as he's willing to do anything to survive. And at this point, Gi-yeon isn't even holding his knife. And even though the violent fighting is very dangerous and you could still die, I have it as the number 2 because it allows for a lot of dirty tactics. This isn't the case for almost any other game. For example, during the glass game, one of the players could tell by the subtle refractions in the glass which were safe and breakable plates, but then the games master turned off the lights so he couldn't cheat. Red light, green light doesn't even give you the chance to trick anyone because any physical move is punished by death, and killing others doesn't even help you there. In tug of war, the teams never make contact and are separated, so you can't sabotage them. This means that the competition where you have the highest chance of winning would most likely be the marble contest. This is the one in the 6th episode and it allows for the most cheating. The rules are pretty simple. You team up with one other person and each one of you has 10 marbles. Then you have to play a game of your choice for all the marbles. However, there is no physical violence allowed. In this episode, the show explores how far each character is willing to go to survive. It literally tests how dirty everyone is willing to play. And since the contestants didn't know the game ahead of time, they team up with someone they trust, so you can probably exploit your partner's goodwill. This is very clearly seen in the game between Cho Sang-woo and Ali. They play even or odds. The first player puts a certain number of marbles in their hand and the other person has to guess if it's an even or odd amount. The second player then puts in their hand the number of marbles they want to wager if they get it right. Cho Sang-woo keeps losing to Ali, and when he's down to his last marble, he decides to trick him. He manipulates Ali into thinking that they can both make it out alive and play against another weaker team later on. He reminds Ali of all the nice things he did for him, like paying for a bus fare he needed in the 2nd episode. Then in an extremely heart-wrenching moment, Cho Sang-woo blatantly abuses the trust of his gullible teammate. He tricks Ali into giving him his 19 marbles so that he can put them into a pouch. But Cho Sang-woo swiftly exchanges the bag for his case, which he filled with a bunch of rocks. Even though this is one of the saddest moments in the show, this is what you need to do. Lie, manipulate, and cheat all you can, and prey on your partner's trust. Even Guion does this when he plays against the old man. They play the same game of even or odds, and this geezer seemingly can't remember if he guessed even or odd. So Guion lies to him and always tells him that he chose wrong. But let's say you have a partner who doesn't fall for any of your tricks and you start losing your marbles quickly. Well, there is still something you can do. We see this in the game between two of the thugs. One of the bullies, Young Duck So, is down to his last few marbles, and then he decides that they should play a different game. The other guy's like, hell no, I'm about to win and leave this game alive. But Young Duck So says that it would be the fair thing to let him have a second chance. And the guards agree, because he didn't choose the first game. Then he just picks a game that he knows he's good at, which involves them throwing marbles into a hole. And big surprise, he ends up winning. Now you can still die here, but it's the one game where you're almost completely in control. So unless you have privileged information like in the sugar cookie game, or you're in a favorable team like in tug of war, or you end up being strategically positioned in the crowd like in red light, green light, or the glass test, the marble game is the one you're most likely to win. There is the least amount of luck because when you're playing against a really tough opponent, you might have the option to just switch the game halfway through to something you're good at. And if your teammates really trust you, you can cheat, lie, and steal without any consequences. So if you're willing to go low and play as dirty as you can, the marble game is the one for you. So that's pretty much it for the video, but I still have a question for you guys. Would you have blatantly manipulated and betrayed Ollie for your own gain like Cho Sang-woo did? I would, even though it was very sad. I mean, in the beginning, I rooted for the guy with the snake tattoo. I thought he was hilarious. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you liked it, and that I get to see you in the next video.